stepmother was sitting at my dining table eating off my grandmother's china when I walked in, and the first thing she said was, "Oh good, you're here. We need to talk about the access codes." Not hello. Not an explanation for why she and her 3 movers were already halfway through emptying my second bedroom into a U-Haul parked in my driveway. Just the access codes. Like I was the contractor who'd shown up late. I stood in my own foyer in my work coat holding a bag of groceries, and I watched my father walk out of my kitchen with a beer in his hand. My beer. From my fridge. In the house I bought with 11 years of my own money. "Don't make this dramatic," he said. "Your sister needs the space more than you do. She's got the twins coming. You're one person. What do you need 3 bedrooms for?" Before I tell you how I took every single thing back without ever raising my voice, I want you to tell me in the comments, what's the most shameless thing a relative has ever done while looking you dead in the eye? I read all of them. Everyone. I'm going to back up because you need to understand who these people are before you understand what I did. My name doesn't matter much for this. What matters is that I was always the one who could handle it. That's the role I got assigned somewhere around age 9, and I never got to give it back. My younger sister was the one who needed handling. There's a difference, and in my family that difference was the whole economy. She was the soft one, the sensitive one, the one who'd cry if you looked at her wrong. And so the entire household organized itself around not making her cry. I was the other one, the sturdy one, the one you could lean your whole weight on because she wouldn't tip. I bought my house in Asheville 4 years ago. A craftsman bungalow with 3 bedrooms, a real front porch, and a backyard with 2 dogwoods that bloom white in April. I'm a hospice nurse. I'd work doubles, holidays, every overnight nobody else wanted, for over a decade, and I put away every spare dollar. The down payment was $41,000. I remember the exact number because I counted it more times than I'm proud of. When I closed, I sat on the bare floor of the empty living room and cried, and they weren't sad tears. They were the first time in my life I'd ever owned something nobody could take. You can see where this is going. It started small, the way these things do. My sister's lease was ending. The babies were coming. Twins, a hard pregnancy. She was on partial bed rest. My father called and asked, in that voice he used when the answer was already decided, whether she could stay with me for a bit. Of course I said yes. What kind of monster says no to a pregnant sister on bed rest? So she moved into my second bedroom in March, and her boyfriend moved in 2 weeks later, because of course he did, and my house stopped being quiet. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself a lot of things that spring. By June, my father and stepmother were over constantly, helping, which mostly meant rearranging my kitchen and commenting on my grocery choices. By July, my sister had taken over the 3rd bedroom too, the one I used as an office, because she needed a nursery. And where was she supposed to put the babies? On the porch? By August, I was sleeping in my own master bedroom, feeling like a guest in a hotel I was paying for. And then came the conversation that, looking back, was the real beginning of the end. My father sat me down at my own table and told me, very reasonably, that it didn't make sense for the house to be in my name. "What if something happens to you?" he said. "You work with dying people all day. God forbid you bring something home. God forbid there's an accident. The girls need stability. We should put the house in a family trust. Protect it. For everybody. For everybody. I want you to hear how that word does the work in a family like mine. It means me." I said I'd think about it. He took that as a yes. He brought me papers a week later. A quitclaim deed and a trust document, both already drafted by some lawyer I'd never met, with my sister and my father named as co-trustees and beneficiaries. My name appeared exactly once, on the line where I was supposed to sign away the only thing I'd ever earned. I didn't sign. I said I needed my own attorney to review it. The temperature in the room dropped about 30 degrees. My stepmother said very quietly that it was sad I didn't trust my own family. My sister cried, which was the nuclear option. And then I was the villain for making a pregnant woman cry. I went to work that night and held the hand of a man who was actively dying, and I thought, At least he's honest about what's happening to him. I didn't sign for 2 more weeks, and that's when they decided to stop asking. I worked a 16-hour shift on a Thursday. A patient I'd cared for 3 months passed in the early morning, and I stayed past the end of my shift to sit with the family. Because that's the job, the real job, the part nobody pays you for. I drove home running on fumes, and that's when I walked into my own house and found my stepmother eating off my grandmother's china and a U-Haul in my driveway, and my father drinking my beer, and the words, "We need to talk about the access codes." They'd changed the locks. While I was at work, they told the locksmith my father was the homeowner. He had a key, he had the paperwork, the half-signed paperwork, and the locksmith had no reason to doubt a calm, older man with documents. They'd moved my bedroom furniture into the garage. They'd already started packing my closet into boxes labeled, "Donate." I want to tell you I exploded. I didn't. Something in me went very, very still instead. The same stillness I have at a deathbed, where everything narrows and gets clear. I looked at my father and I asked him, calm as anything, where he expected me to sleep that night. "You can afford a hotel," my stepmother said, not even looking up from her plate. "You don't have a baby to think about. Be reasonable." So I left. I want you to understand that I left on purpose. I didn't beg, I didn't scream, I didn't make a scene the neighbors could screenshot. I picked up my groceries off the floor, where I'd set them. I walked back out my own front door, and I drove to a Hampton Inn off the interstate and got a room and sat on the end of the bed at 6 in the morning with my heart going like a trapped bird. A lot of you are already yelling at your screen. Called the police. Why did she leave? I know, I felt it too. But here's what a calm older man with documents and a crying pregnant woman looks like to a patrol officer at 6 a.m. A family dispute. Civil matter. "Ma'am, this is something you'll have to take up in court." I knew that. I'd watched it happen to a friend 2 years before. Watched her stand on her own lawn while an officer told her he couldn't remove her ex because he lived there now. The police don't untangle who really owns what. They keep the peace and they leave, and the second they left, I'd be locked out again. Except now I'd be the woman who called the cops on her pregnant sister. And that story would travel through my family for the rest of my life. I didn't need the police. I needed something they couldn't take from me by crying. So I did the thing that scares people like my family more than anything. I went quiet. I didn't answer my father's texts. I didn't respond to my stepmother's voicemail informing me, generously, that I could come get my personal items from the garage on Saturday. I let my sister's Instagram stories pile up unwatched. The ones I knew were photos of my living room with captions about finally settling into our forever home. I let them sit in my house, drinking my wine, certain they'd won, because I needed them comfortable. Comfortable people get careless. Comfortable people stop watching their own hands. Here is what they didn't know about me. They thought I was a hospice nurse, which to them meant soft, meant sentimental, meant easy. They never once asked what I did before nursing. They never knew that I'd spent 4 years as a title examiner at a real estate firm in Charlotte in my 20s before I burned out and went into healthcare. They never knew that I could read a chain of title in my sleep, that I knew exactly what a quitclaim deed could and couldn't do, that I knew the difference between possession and ownership the way other people know their own phone number. A quitclaim deed transfers whatever interest the signer has. I had never signed it. They had a document with a blank signature line. In the eyes of the county, I still owned my house, completely free and clear. Changing the locks didn't change the deed. Moving my furniture didn't change the deed. The only thing standing between me and full legal ownership was a piece of paper I had never put my name to, and they didn't seem to fully understand that. But I didn't want to just call a lawyer and slowly, expensively evict my own father over 6 months while he gutted the place and the family told everyone what a monster I was. I'd watched that movie. Slow legal grinding just gives people time to do damage and rewrite the story. I wanted it clean. I wanted it fast, and I wanted them to do it to themselves. So first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I pulled the records. Everything is public if you know where to look. I pulled the county property records on my own house just to confirm my name, only my name, no liens, no transfers, no trust. Good. Then, because something my father had said was itching at me, protect it for everybody, I started pulling other things. My father had remarried 4 years ago. My stepmother had come into the family with a lot of opinions and very little visible income, and yet they were always somehow fine. New truck. Cruises. The lawyer who drafted those documents. I pulled my father's name through the civil court index for the county where he lived. And there it was. A judgment, 18 months old. A collections firm had sued him and won $63,000 on a defaulted business loan from a landscaping company that had folded. There was a lien attached to the judgment, an active, unsatisfied lien, looking for any asset with my father's name on it to attach to. I sat in that Hampton Inn, and I felt the whole shape of it click into place like a bone going back into a socket. That's why they wanted my house in a trust, not for stability, not for the girls. A house in my name, with my father merely living in it, was untouchable by his creditors. But the second my father became a co-trustee and beneficiary, the second his name attached to that property in any legal way, that lien could reach right through the trust and grab a piece of it. Unless, and here's the part that made me actually laugh out loud alone in a hotel room, unless they structured it so my father got the benefit of living there without his name ever appearing as an owner. The creditor could see. They wanted me to deed the house into a trust controlled by my sister, with my father as a hidden silent beneficiary. They were trying to use me to hide an asset from a court judgment. That has a name. It's called a fraudulent conveyance. And it's not a family squabble. It's the kind of thing that gets a judgment creditor's lawyer very, very excited. Because the second you try to hide assets to dodge a lien, you hand them the right to claw the whole thing back and then some. I forwarded the judgment, the lien, and the unsigned trust paperwork to a real estate attorney I found in Asheville. A sharp, unsmiling woman named Priya Venkataraman who'd done title litigation for 20 years and who, when I laid it all out for her over the phone, was quiet for a long moment and then said, "Oh, they have no idea what they've started, do they?" I told her no. They thought I was the soft one. Here was the plan. And I'll be honest. The part of me that holds dying people's hands was not entirely comfortable with it, but the part of me that had been the family's load-bearing wall for 30 years was done. Completely done. I called my father. I made my voice small. I made it the voice I'd had at 9, the one that needed his approval more than air. "Dad," I said, "I've been thinking. You're right, I'm exhausted. I can't keep fighting all of you. I'll sign. I'll put the house in a trust like you wanted. I need it done properly, so it actually protects everyone. I don't want it to fall apart later." I could hear him relax through the phone. The huff of a man who's just won. "Now you're being smart," he said. "I'll have the lawyer send the papers over." "No," I said. "I want my own lawyer to handle it. So it's clean. So nobody can ever say I was pressured. We'll all sign together in her office on the record. You and me as the people transferring it, and you'll need to sign the trust as co-trustee so it's legally binding. Notarized. Witnessed. The whole thing." He loved that. He thought I was finally folding the right way, doing it formally, on the record, making it ironclad. He had no idea that on the record was the entire point, because what Priya had drafted was not a simple trust transfer. It was a trust transfer with a sworn funding affidavit, a document where my father would have to attest under oath in writing before a notary to his financial status and his interest in the property as a co-trustee and beneficiary. He'd have to swear he had the right to hold a beneficial interest in real estate, and the affidavit asked, in plain language buried in standard boilerplate he'd never read, whether the signer was subject to any outstanding judgments or liens that might affect his capacity to hold trust assets. If he lied and checked no, he'd be committing fraud on a notarized legal document, while trying to hide an asset from a creditor, which is exactly the felony the creditor's lawyer dreams about. If he told the truth and disclosed the lien, then the entire transfer would be visible, on the record, as an attempt to move property into a trust to shield it from that very lien. A textbook fraudulent conveyance, void on its face. And again, exactly what hands the creditor everything. There was no version where he signed and came out ahead. To take my house, he had to put his hand on a document that destroyed him either way. His greed for the house and his terror of the lien could not both be satisfied. The only safe move was to walk away from my house entirely, which was all I'd ever wanted. We met in Priya's office on a Tuesday afternoon. Glass walls, a view of the mountains going gold in the early fall light. There was a notary. There was a court reporter, because I told my father the transfer of a high-value asset required a sworn record, and he'd nodded like he understood what that meant. My stepmother came in a blazer she clearly thought made her look like she belonged in a room like that. My sister waddled in last, one hand on her belly, the other holding a phone she was already filming the view with. My father wore the suit he wore to weddings and funerals. They sat down across from me. Nobody asked how I was. My stepmother asked if there was coffee. Priya laid out the trust documents. My father reached for the pen immediately. He wanted it done before I changed my mind. Priya stopped him with one flat sentence. Before you sign, mister, I'm obligated as an officer of the court to walk you through the funding affidavit. And she did. Slowly, in plain English. She read him the line about outstanding judgments and liens. She told him that signing it falsely was a felony, and that the document would become part of a permanent, sworn, recorded transfer. This was his off-ramp. This was the moment a careful man would have frozen, would have said, "Wait, what affidavit? Let me read that, let me call my own lawyer." I watched him. I watched the calculation move behind his eyes. And I watched his contempt win. He looked at me, his sturdy, soft, easy daughter, trying to scare him with lawyer words, and he picked up the pen. "I know my own finances," he said. And he checked no. And he signed. My stepmother signed as a witness. My sister clapped, softly, and whispered, "Finally." And I felt the last warm thing inside me toward her go cold and quiet and permanent. And then I didn't reach for the deed. I looked at Priya. She opened a second folder and laid a stapled document on top of the affidavit my father had just signed. He squinted at it. "What's that?" "That," I said, and my voice didn't shake at all, "is a certified copy of the $63,000 judgment against you and the active lien attached to it, filed 18 months ago." Still unsatisfied, the room went so quiet I could hear the court reporter's machine tick. "You just swore, under oath, on a recorded notarized affidavit, that you have no outstanding judgments or liens." I said it gently. The way I tell families the breathing has changed. "But you do. You've had one the whole time. That's why you wanted the house in a trust, isn't it? Not for stability. To hide it from the people you owe." My father's face went the gray of a man on his last morning. That's not. We're family. You either lied to a notary just now, which is fraud," Priya said without warmth, "or you've just created a sworn, recorded, witnessed paper trail of an attempt to fraudulently convey real property to evade a creditor. Both are reportable. Both are actionable. And as an officer of the court, with knowledge of an active judgment, I'm not able to simply forget what just happened in this room." My stepmother stood up so fast her chair screeched. "Give me that. That's ours. Give it to me." She lunged for the affidavit. Priya put one hand flat on it and didn't move. "It's evidence now, ma'am. Sit down." My sister started to cry. The real weapon, the one that had ended every argument in our family for 25 years. "How could you do this to us? I'm having babies. Where are we supposed to go?" And for the first time in my entire life, it didn't move me. I looked at her and I felt nothing but a distant, tired sadness, like watching a storm hit a town you used to live in. "You're going to leave my house," I said. "Today. You entered by changing the locks on a home you don't own, on property I never signed away. The deed is still in my name, only my name. You have no lease, no title, no trust. Because the trust was never funded, because the transfer never completed, because none of you actually understood that you needed me to sign, and I never did. I turned to my father. You spent 2 weeks living in a house you thought you'd taken. You never took anything. You just moved your furniture into a place that was always entirely legally mine. He understood it then. I watched it land. He'd been so busy trying to outsmart a court judgment that he'd walked into a room and signed his own confession in front of a notary, a court reporter, and his daughter, for a house he'd never legally controlled for a single second. We can fix this, he said. The same words he used my whole childhood, right before he made me fix it. Tell her to tear it up. We'll leave. We'll go tonight. Just don't send that anywhere. It's a sworn record, Dad, I said. It already exists. I can't unknow what you swore. Neither can she. I stood up and picked up my bag. You taught me that family is just leverage with a nicer name. I finally believed you. I'll tell you how it ended, because you've earned it. I had the locks changed back that same afternoon, with a locksmith and a copy of my deed and a sheriff's deputy present for the civil standby, which is the actual, boring, legal way you get people out of a property they have no claim to, no drama required. My sister and her boyfriend were gone by nightfall. They went to my father's house, the one with the lien on it. The judgment creditor's lawyer received a very interesting package about a man who had just sworn under oath, on a recorded notarized document, regarding his finances. They reopened collection efforts with enthusiasm. Within a few months, the lien did exactly what liens do when they finally find purchase. My father's accounts were levied. The truck was repossessed. He didn't go to prison. Fraudulent conveyance attempts that don't complete usually don't. And I made my peace with that. But he lost the cushion he'd spent 4 years building. And he lost it knowing his daughter had been the one to hand the creditor the key. My sister had her twins in a 2-bedroom rental 40 minutes from anyone. Last I heard, she and my father weren't speaking, each blaming the other. The family that had organized itself for 30 years around protecting her had finally protected her right into the ground. And me. I went back to my craftsman bungalow with the white dogwoods. I scrubbed every surface they touched. I bought new sheets, a new mattress, new wine glasses, and I gave my grandmother's china to a coworker because I couldn't look at it anymore. I still work hospice. I still hold the hands of dying strangers, because that's real. That's the realest thing I know. And not one of those people has ever once tried to take my house. People will tell you to take the high road. Forgive. They're your family. But some people aren't family. They're a debt collector wearing your father's face, and the only mercy you can show yourself is to stop paying. I didn't burn my family down. I just stopped being the wall they leaned on, and they fell. The way anything falls when the thing holding it up finally walks away. If you'd have signed your name where they told you to, comment I'd have signed. If you'd have gone quiet and pulled the records, tell me that too. I read every single one. The thing nobody tells you about being the strong one is that it isn't a compliment. It's a job description, and the pay is everything you own. I spent 30 years believing that if I just carried enough, gave enough, stayed sturdy enough, my father would finally see me as a person instead of a column he could lean the whole house on. He never did. And the day he changed the locks on the home I bought with 11 years of overnight shifts, I finally understood that some people don't want your help, they want your back, and they'll break it and call it family. Here's what I learned standing in that Hampton Inn at 6 in the morning, with my heart going like a trapped bird. The moment my father swore no on that affidavit, he wasn't undone by me. He was undone by what he was. The lien was already there. The judgment was already there. His own greed had built the trap 18 months before I ever walked into Priya's office. I didn't destroy him. I just stopped being the wall that kept his lies standing up. And lies, like anything else, fall the second the thing holding them up walks away. That's the part that still keeps me up some nights. I didn't have to lie to him. I only had to let him keep lying to himself. If you take one thing from what happened to me, let it be this. Be good, but don't confuse being good with being useful to people who would feed you to a creditor. Kindness without a spine isn't kindness. It's just a slow way of disappearing. I gave and called it love, when it was really fear wearing love's coat. And learn things. Learn the boring, unglamorous things, what a deed is, what your name on a document actually means, where the public records live. They thought I was soft because I hold dying people's hands for a living. They never asked what I knew. The 4 years I spent reading titles in my 20s is the reason I still have my front porch and my white dogwoods. Knowledge isn't power until the day it's the only thing between you and the street. Then, it's everything. But more than being good, more than being smart, what saved me was the part that wouldn't fold. The quiet that came over me instead of the scream. The 3 days I went dark when every cell in my body wanted to bang on my own door. Staying steady, when staying steady, costs you everything you feel in the moment. That's the muscle nobody can give you. You build it alone. Usually in a hotel room you're paying for to sleep in a stranger's bed. I'm not telling you to cut off your family. I'm telling you to stop paying a debt that was never yours, to people who only learned to take because you only ever learned to give. The wall got to walk away. So can you.